Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. The coach has returned. He is an amazing leadership coach, helps leaders, individuals, CEOs, C-suite executives move their life forward through leadership skills, tips, techniques, training, coaching. He's also a pilot and teaches flying. And interestingly, today we're going to blend the two together to give you a real prime example of some of the principles involved in proper leadership coaching. Coachingforrelevance.com is his website. Randy Swaim is his name. He's back with us. Hey, Randy, how you doing?
Great, doing great. It's always an honor to be with you guys.
Wonderful to have you back here. I've learned so much about leadership. Honestly, I share it with others. I look like the smartest man in the room.
Hey, there you go, man. There you go. You got my compliments, buddy.
I'm part of a men's group, and some of the principles that you've talked about, I've shared at that group. I give you credit, of course.
Yeah.
So,
and you know, it's interesting. There's a couple of the guys over at the DFW airport that have read my autobiography, because there's a lot of this that comes out in that too. A couple of them have said that a lot of the people at a couple of their churches want me to come by and talk, kind of thing. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I welcome people passing on insights.
Sure. And we've talked before about your aviation career, which is just a part of you.
Yeah.
And we haven't mentioned it in a while, but interestingly, you've got a story involving aviation that ties into leadership skills.
Yes, exactly, and I'll share that here right now. But it's interesting, because what I will tell the people before I start the story is this brings some insights of true decision making, true situational awareness, but also it brings some neuroscience aspects to it, because as I've said on the show a couple of times, with neuroscience, so many people in today's world just go back to the rote academic pictures that are all back in here in their cerebellum, where they don't have to think about nothing. Mm-hmm. But you know what? If that's what you're doing, your team's not getting any better. And you have to go to the processing ability of the frontal lobe in your brain, and you have to learn how you're going to get that developed in yourself and in your people. And I'll go ahead and kind of share the story on this. And I will say this, that as I train pilots and develop flight crews, one of the things I routinely tell them is the aspect that when you look at how a pilot in command captain can make decision making, kind of thing. If you think about it, a lot of people say that their decision making, they can choose to do anything they feel like they need to do. And to a certain extent, yeah, but not exactly that, because if you look at the regulations, particularly in the federal regulations here in this country, the only thing that a pilot is allowed to do is to deviate from the rules of the road. Legally, they're not allowed to deviate from the flight manual or the checklist and things of that nature and all. But I tell people, is there a time when you may need to do that? And there is. And I'll kind of share this in this story. And this comes from an accident that unfortunately some people died in. And it was a small commuter airline airplane. This was about 30 years ago, I think it was, but I've always remembered it because it's central to what we're talking about today. And it was coming across, and it was still over the water off the east coast of Canada, and it was coming into a Canadian airport. And there came a time when they had, if I remember correctly, it was kind of an electrical sort of smoke and fumes and fire situation, which is bad news in an airplane. And what happened is the weather was pretty nice, and they actually could see the airport they were going to. But what they did is they started to go into this orbiting, flying circular stuff out over the water to go through and complete the checklist. Well, what happened was that they were out there long enough, because sometimes that can be a longer checklist. And when you look at those kind of situations in an airplane, they expand and get bad a lot quicker than most others. And one of the things that happened on this is that the airplane, right as it was going around in one of the turns there, all of a sudden, everything in the airplane went black, all the electrics went out and the airplane actually pitched over and crashed into the water. And basically everybody, and I don't remember how many people were on it or whatever, but everybody on the airplane died. And so the point that I kind of throw out this a little bit is this: there is a point in your decision making when you talk about the processing up here and you're really choosing to make the right call. There is a point where you have to kind of step aside from just the rote, even the legal stuff, because are there times when it's legal to disobey the law? Yeah, but it's got to be an ethical call. And in that case, had they made the choice, seeing the airport they're going to go ahead and go straight to the airport and get it on the ground and get everybody out of it, that could have been the ethical call for that. And guess what? Ethics is not clear. It's not something where it's like it's always right. And so when you think about leading your team in challenging environments and challenging situations, you have to be aware of this aspect. How are you developing their processing ability so that they can uncover, even if you're not there with them right then, they can process and uncover the right ethical choices to make. And it's interesting. I think I've shared this a long time ago on one of the shows, but Sully Sullenberger, you know, when he had ditched
What
his
was it called?
airplane
Miracle on the Hudson.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, and he ditched his airplane in the Hudson when birds went through and shut both engines down. And there were a lot of people right after that happened, that even clients that came in that I worked with said, well, yeah, well, they got into the simulator and they found out that he could have made it to Teterboro. And here's what I told them. I said, yes, if there's no unexpected turbulence or no unexpected jet wash or no unexpected wind issues going in there. And I said, he made the right ethical call. And what I'm really glad of is that the government never went after him. They were thinking about it, but they never went after him for his choice, because it turned out that he made the right ethical call to minimize risk and enhance the successful outcome for the people. And everybody survived it, as
Sure.
you know. And that's why they call it a miracle in the Hudson and stuff. But the bottom line is, and I throw this out to people, when you think about, you know, you're looking at your team in a situation that is not just rote academic, you know, how are you really developing your team? And in fact, I'll say this: how are you really developing yourself to be able to make the right, successful decisions, even when it doesn't fit an actual academic sort of standard? And people have to be thinking about that very often when you're talking about leading your team, and really in a road academic, or I'm sorry, a you know, rapidly changing and unpredictable situation, because you know, you may have factors come on that you didn't expect. And if all you're doing is saying, well, you know, when I was in training, this is what they told me to do, and so, you know, here's what we're going to do, and if it doesn't work, we'll just blame it on something, you know. And you'd be surprised, I have actually heard individuals say that very thing. And you know what? That is unprofessional, and it is not ethical, and it is not right. And
Wow.
and so, you know, I throw this out to you from to people from just a leadership aspect. To what extent do you have some clarity on when it's right? Because I'll tell you what, breaking off from what the kind of the requirement might be to go into some ethical thing may be wrong. It may be second guessing what's really there. It may be there's some insights you don't have, possibly, or it might be that it's the right choice. And when you're talking about your situation, I know in aviation we talk a lot about situational awareness. And you know what? When you're talking about your team and you leading your team, to what extent are you truly situationally aware of what's really going on? And to what extent does that situational awareness allow you to not make excuses and not just try to kind of, you know, pat yourself on the back for the fact that you decided to do this, but you know that this was the right choice for the situation. And that is not something that happens just real quick and right immediately. You got to give some, and part of the ability to think about this and to engender your brain and your neuroscience aspect to really gain insights on that and to get a sense of that and to be able to envision that and have accurate 100% situational awareness in a given unpredictable situation and make the right choice. Can you do that? And as a leader, what do you need to do differently to enhance that in you? But also, what do you need to do to truly enhance that and help that become part of your team? So that, because I'll tell you, if your team is growing in that, and I don't mean making excuses. I mean just saying, hey, we'll go do this. No, what I mean is having clarity on that aspect of the situation and everything, and knowing what the right decision is, which enhances safety and minimizes risk and increases the chances that it's going to be a great outcome, kind of thing. And having that clarity in their mindset, that is huge. And that is just a critical when you're talking about bringing your team up. Because here's the thing, once your team members start getting that kind of proficiency in the processing ability in their brain, what you'll find is that a couple of your teammates will probably come up with some insights on a factor that came on that nobody else saw. And you know what? It might be, oh, you know what? Yeah, this is what we can do. And the rest of the team goes, oh, yeah, kind of thing, or sometimes you as the leader can do that. But when you're talking about that aspect of neuroscience and you're talking about that ethical decision making that is not clear and cut, but sometimes the decision you make may not be the best one for the situation, or it may be the absolute best one and the only one that's really going to guarantee safety in the situation, depending on what it is. And that's just some things that people need to think about. And when you're talking about leading your team in a rapidly changing and unpredictable environment, you got to kind of have some understanding on that and gain some insight in your mind. And that's for sure.
When we use the word ethical, I'd love to get your exact definition, your feelings on that.
Yeah.
Let's go there.
Well, you know what? To be honest, that's a great question there, Steve. That is a fantastic question, because what defines ethics? And you know what? What I will do is I will kind of throw, for anybody listening, I will kind of throw that out there for just a second, because, when you talk about the ethics of it and everything, that part of the challenge on that is ethics has a certain degree of flexibility and not a clear, cold, this is what's right to do, kind of thing. Yeah, you may have something ethics. I think in general, the ethics aspect of it is one that generates the highest rate for success in what you're trying to accomplish, the safety for your people, if you're talking about an airplane, the safety for the passengers, kind of thing. And that's this airplane that crashed up in there that I just mentioned. That's one of the things that they did. What they were doing is trying to go with the rote academic thing that, oh, we're supposed to go through this checklist and kind of thing. And guess what? That increased the risk. And had they, since they could basically see the airport they were going to, and they were looking at going through and completing the checklist before they go over and do that. There's some situations, if you have something like an engine failure or something like that, that guess what? You can do that and it doesn't hurt anything. But if you have something, in fact, I'll just, one of the things I share with pilots is if you have an electrical fire or an electrical situation like that in your airplane, People don't realize this. This comes from the aerospace training that I received for 2 years up in University of Buffalo. But if you think about it, if you have situations like that where the electrics in your airplane is kind of catching fire a little bit and heating up and all, what it does is the the heat and the impact doubles about every 20 seconds. So if you think about it, if you do that, if you're out there orbiting like this and you do that for 20 seconds, the heat and the effect of that is twice what it was. If you go for another 20 seconds, it's 4 times what it was. If you go for another 20 seconds, which would be 60 seconds, it's 8 times hotter than when you started. And so there's a thing with, when you talk about the ethics aspect of it, having clarity on the factors that are involved, what's truly related to the situation, what's really there, what's the real risk, and now what's the right decision. Because if they decided to come over and go ahead and land, and if they came in and landed, even if they were overweight, you're not supposed to do that. But you know what? If you come in and land overweight and airplane comes to a stop and you shut down, everybody gets out of the airplane safe, guess what? That can be an ethical call. If you do that on something a lot simpler, where you're just avoiding the checklist, that's not ethical. That's not right. So the ethics is a little bit variable. It's a little bit not quite as clear to most people in our society and everything, but basically, when you talk about the ethical thing, I think the big thing on it deals with how you're minimizing risk and increasing the potential success of what you're trying to accomplish here. And it's also increasing the safety and minimizing the risk to the people that are involved and things of that nature. And one of the things I say that when you're talking about the ethical aspect of it, one of the reasons that's sort of kind of challenging is because in a pilot world, or let's face it, if you're talking about leading your team in an environment and something comes up and it becomes a legal case, guess what? The challenge of the ethics and what's a little bit challenging on that, where it's a little bit variable and challenging, guess what? It requires the judge to agree with you. And you know what? They may or they may not. You just don't have any way of knowing. So when you talk about the ethical nature of it, it's not overly clear cut, and it's not ethical just because you want it to be. You gotta, as a leader and in helping your team get a sense of that, you have to have the processing ability where you can see the real picture of that, about how is the risk minimized. Does this really enhance our success and safety and security, kind of thing, and all of that. So it is challenging that when you're talking about leading teams in a challenging environment, guess what? One of the big things on that deals with, do you have the insights, processing ability that helps you to make the right decisions? And it's just something to think about. And it's interesting. A lot of the pilots that I work with over the last 25 years, every now and then I would ask them, before they left and when all the training was done and everything, I'd say, well, I'll tell you what, give some thought to this one question. And he said, what? And I said, if something completely comes on scene that you did not expect in 3 months down the road, what do you think it might be like? And what do you think it's going to affect your thinking, kind of thing? And I just get them sort of pondering that, because a lot of that processing ability and that ability to sense, to process, to clearly see, and all of that, a lot of that can, needs to be developed as you go. And so that you can see those factors earlier as they come on scene and you can make the right decision. And so it's a good lesson from aviation and pilot training and that kind of thing, but it's also a good lesson for leaders who are trying to truly develop their team to be able to function in a challenging, unpredictable environment. And you know what? A lot of the industries that we are in right now, that people are in, may have some of those aspects involved. And as a leader, what do you need to do to really get that processing going, where you're not just going back to rote academic stuff or telling your team just do this, but you can engage some of the conversations that help them and really open up some radical success for what you're trying to accomplish.
If we look at Sully and the situation on the Hudson,
Uh-huh.
if he was your leader, how would you feel about him? And
Mm-hmm.
if you were in that position, would you have done the same thing?
I will tell you this, I would have done exactly and precisely the same thing. And if I was his leader, I'll tell you what, I would have been applauding him all the way, because you know what? When both engines are failed, when somebody says, well, you could have made it over to Teterboro, well, guess what? You're making some assumptions on that. And what if those assumptions are not applicable? And that's what I told those pilots that said he could have made. And I said, yeah, but if there's no unexpected jet wash
Sure.
from an airplane that landed ahead of him or whatever, had he gone over there and got on final with no engines where he's gliding and his airplane sunk in and he hit the ground a mile short of the runway and took out an apartment complex and killed a bunch of people, it's not good. And so he made exactly the right call. And I got to tell you, if I was in his situation, I would have done exactly the same thing.
What is and not to focus on the Sully situation,
yeah,
but it does, in terms of leadership and ethics and all of that.
Yep.
At that moment, and we're just about out of time, but I've always wondered about this. Now I get to talk to a pilot.
Hey,
somebody
you go.
trains.
Cool.
At that moment, engines done.
Mm-hmm.
What is the danger of landing on water coming from a pilot? I can make my assumptions.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let me just tell you this. There's two reasons, that kind of made his choice well. One of the risks has nothing to do with the engines, but one of the risks has to do with a pilot that had never landed on water before.
Well, sure.
That could have increased the risk. Well, one of the reasons he made the choice that he did is because he had flown seaplanes before, and he was very well aware of the factors that are involved in that. So his choice was even
no
more
brainer, man. No brainer.
That's right. And his choice
said
was
that.
choice was more ethical than even a lot of other people might have had for what they did. And like I've flown, I've flown glider tows and things like that, and aerobatic airplanes and all that kind of stuff, but I've never done seaplanes, kind of thing. And
but not to say that you couldn't, especially in that emergency situation. But Sully, go past go. If you with that experience, now it's logically making sense that's it.
And so that's part of the ethics, the fact that if it was somebody else that had never done that, that could have increased the risk for them a little bit. But because he had that experience, guess what? That enhances the ethical nature of his decision, because he had the experience where he could do that. But the bottom line is, like I say, whenever you're leading your team in a program that's just not rotely academic, there's some things like that with the ethical nature, your decision making. At what point do you need to switch it? And on what basis do you say that's valid? And all of that, guess what? That's an aspect that not only you got to develop in yourself, but you have to develop and grow that within your team. So as a team, they have a sense of how they should kind of consider that decision making when something is totally unpredictable and comes on scene, that they go ho ho ho, kind of thing. Wow. And so it's a key point. It's a lesson out of aviation, but it's good for any leader, because guess what? Those ethical natures can come in there, and you can make an ethical choice, which turns out to be not the right ethical choice. You got to have the thinking in there to program, to process it correctly, and have it really related to giving what you're looking to do.
Process.
So it's just huge. It's a huge aspect to think about.
Coachingforrelevance.com is the website. You are available to anybody. You're not a hard seller or anything like that.
Nope.
Got a question? Let's talk about it, see if it's a right fit, and move your leadership skills forward. Randy, thanks for the insight. Thanks for the aeronautical comparison today. Fascinating. Learned a lot about all of this.
Cool. We'll try to add some more going forward.
Awesome. All right. We'll catch up soon. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.